Okay, here we go. Week 11, our penultimate week. Now, it has come to my attention recently that some people think penultimate somehow as a word, P-E-N, and then just the word ultimate, means somehow like more ultimate. But that's absurd. The word, you can just look things up with your phone these days. There's no reason to misconstrue, right? Penultimate means next to last. Ultimate meaning really final or last, and oftentimes the final thing is considered the best. Therefore, ultimate is also used to mean the best, whereas penultimate literally only ever means next to last, and that's the week we're on. All right, next week's our last week. Here we are going to dive into one last long book, Success. No one has been in touch with me in the last several weeks. Like the last time I heard anybody couldn't get their hands on this book was literally the first couple weeks of the semester. So I can only assume you all have this slender book. I think it breaks laws for me to scan it and send you PDFs. Also, as a active reader, this text is just chock full of underline things and marginal notes that would really be very helpful to you for you to engage in the discussion. So therefore, it would be counterproductive to your education to have my text that I've marked up that kind of helps answer the questions that I've posted this week. Now, what is Amos up to here? This is a gross little book. Martin Amos almost always writes in the vein of what we call satire, which is also, like the word penultimate, grossly misunderstood, misused, mischaracterized term. Satire isn't just a story that is, or a tale that is like funny and pokes fun at society. It does do that, but it's a little more complex than that. Originally, there were like two basic story arcs, trajectories. You had tragedy, where we begin with somebody at the height of his or her powers. Because of the actions of the story, they wind up coming way down. Dead, usually. Lots of people dead. Lots of death and dying. That's important to remember. On the other end of the spectrum, there was comedy, where things begin like, oh, they won't let me marry the person I want to marry. I'm in love with this person, but this is going to cause all kinds of problems. And so all kinds of problems ensue. By the end, things wind up happy. Not just happy, though. Generally with a marriage or a dance party. These are important things to keep in mind. Marriages in the traditional stories are meant to give you the idea that there's going to be reproduction. Right? There's going to be procreation. Humanity will continue. Things are going to be healthy. Society is going to move forward. A wedding is a formalization of coupling of people intended to create more people and further our culture and our societies. So that's important. We also dance at weddings, but if it only ends with a dance party, that's fine. Dancing is, how can you not see it? Old school. And this isn't some kind of weird, this is why. Because if you're ever like, why does the Taliban ban dancing? What's up with this movie Dirty Dancing where, uptight people didn't like dance? Like, dancing is historically, this isn't me being a prude, this is just a fact, actually. Dancing is historically been used, whether it's always the case or not, but dancing has historically been used in human cultures all across space and time as a mating ritual. So that's what it's doing there, and that's what it's doing there in Western stories. You can disagree with that all you want, but when dancing gets more and more throughout the late 20th century and early 21st century, when you see like dancing get more and more sexualized, that's just kind of the natural progression of dancing. We're moving our bodies and trying to hopefully turn each other on, attract a mate. Like, that's literally like what dancing has been used for throughout human history. So comedies would sometimes start off with people want to be with one another, they can't. By the end, they either are married or they're dancing with one another, which is leading you that way. What does all this have to do with satire? So satire is not just a comedy. It's not just stuff that's funny. It's not just a story that's funny that pokes fun. It's dark. A true satire is dark. It's not going to end with a marriage or a dance party. Hopefully that's not a spoiler, if that's what you thought was going to happen in this book. That's not where we're headed. A satire is kind of a weird blend. It is often funny. There are places where if you've got a messed up sense of humor, you can laugh at this. But it's also not supposed to be reproductive. The energy, if you will, of this story is not reproductive, not productive, not something that's going to keep society moving forward with more new humans. Because we're making fun. We're more than making fun. We're like lampooning. We are stabbing at. We are attacking as a satirist, as a satire writer. That person is attacking society. So they're not going to end it with like, and society keeps on moving forward. Great. Like, so there's going to be lots of things, symbols and images that are not healthy for the procreation and continuation of humanity. Some of these things are going to be disturbing. So just so you know, there's going to be lots of, as far as content goes, crass, foul content. The narrators are frankly both misogynists, which is, of course, not to say that this writer is not a misogynist. I've read lots of his stuff. I wouldn't just throw a misogynist on the syllabus just to mix things up. These characters, when they say foul things about women, that means what we're talking about. I mean, how does the society keep moving forward? Like, you do need biological male, biological female parts to create new humans. So if half of that part is looking at the other half of that part and saying, like, those people are X, Y, Z, and, like, being disparaging, that's unhealthy. Equally unhealthy for the continuation and growth of society is some of the racism that you will see from at least one of the narrators of this story. The N-word pops up, I think, I didn't do a solid count, but at least once in our selection, and, just other kind of, again, crass and often racist words and phrases. So just be aware of that. Again, it's again part of a way of criticizing a culture, in much the same way that I think Heart of Darkness was doing. Except this is from 1978, so we're not maybe necessarily enslaving people in the jungles in this book, but they live in London now together. And how well is that going? Right? That's kind of the commentary. That's part of the commentary of the book, I'd suggest, not to give away any like analytical meanings or whatever. So that's all stuff you need to be aware of right up front. I didn't just assign a messed up book for the sake of assigning a messed up book. It's messed up, I think, for a reason. It's a satire. It's meant to make you think. The word success is, again, I think this is, well, let's just say it's not the first time a book has a title. That seems maybe simple, but the word will pop up a bunch of times, and I think it is important to think about how is the word success used by our narrators in particular, but our characters in general. What does success mean? I mean, sometimes that's like a high school 5-paragraph essay, right? Define success. What does success mean to you? So in a way, that's kind of part of a thing to think about with this book as well. You also have, well, Martin Amis. Who the heck is Martin Amis? Lucky duck, if you ask me. His father, just, similar to Virginia Woolf, he's born in a very privileged situation. His father, Sir Kingsley Amis. Kingsley was his first name. Sir Kingsley Amis is Martin Amis's dad. And Sir Kingsley Amis became a knight, thus the Sir, for his contributions to British literature. So his dad was a really well-regarded, really well-respected writer, part of what was called the Angry Young Men movement in the 50s, like post-World War II. Instead of like in America we had the Beat movement, where our angry young men, if you will, tried to get more spiritual. The British version or historical parallel in England was, again, a resistance to the sort of very homogenous culture of the 50s in the West, but their response was more anger driven, whereas in America it was more spiritual and eventually drug driven, which led to the hippies in the 60s and all that stuff that I told you kind of connects back to Romanticism. So that's not what's happening there. But his dad, well-known writer, so that means Martin, our writer for the week, grew up surrounded by really famous and influential writers, sometimes Nobel laureates and things like that. The only other things I guess worth mentioning before this video gets too long is because I've hopefully braced you for the things you might need to be warned about, triggering wise. Two things you want to think about is I mentioned narrators. So do make sure you're keeping track of who's telling the story at any given time. Amos does a good job of giving you little signals. There'll be little quotes. Funnily enough, it gets quite boring being chased and squabbled over the entire time. Gregory. So everything after that will come from Gregory's point of view. You flip through and then you'll get to a quote from Terry. It'll say, "It's easy enough to see what it was that fucked me up. Terry." So that'll be, you'll know who's speaking if you pay attention to those little signals. Also, do take note that they will sometimes tell the same event twice, but the way Terry tells it versus the way Gregory tells it, they're not always going to be the same. So that's something to keep your eye out for. That will further enhance your appreciation, I think, of what's happening here with this story. And in that way, hopefully, even if you find it vulgar and crass and stupid or whatever, which I certainly don't think it is, or I wouldn't have put it on the syllabus, but if that's your takeaway, do at least learn to appreciate the fact that there is some artistry, some serious artistry going in here. And of course, I think there are very many sentences that are beautiful and sometimes hilarious. The only other thing that you might want to take note of is just that the way time goes by, the chapters are sort of organized, almost like we're reading journal entries. The months go by. We start in January, literally, instead of chapter 1, we start off with January 1st, and the book kind of progresses in that way through the year. And so just, that might help if that's a thing that could be easily overlooked, that I don't think you should overlook. And then, of course, I have, I know you're working on your final papers. I've given you back midterm papers. If you didn't get your midterm paper back, that means I didn't get it, because all the midterm papers I received, I've graded. I like to mark them up, so I print them, wrote on them, sent them back as PDFs with my handwriting on them. And I know at least one student sent me something I couldn't open, and I've contacted that student, but that student is hopefully watching this, and if that student is one of the people who has not received their midterm paper graded back, that would be why. So do make sure I get it. I would like to get it so I can grade it so you don't fail the class. But anyway, that's a side note. The thing I'm getting at is that because I know that you're supposed to be working on your final papers, there's going to be just 2 questions this week, and I anticipate maybe 2 questions next week. I might change my mind, but trying to keep the readings this week's readings a little longer than other readings we've done. Next week's reading will be shorter again. So, I don't know. I might revisit my questions and change my mind, but this video's already gone longer than I wanted it to. So, as always, you have my email address. There's just 1 T in my first name, so make sure you do that correctly. And I'll get back to you. I think I have at least 1 or 2 student questions that I do need to respond to. So if you're watching this right now and I haven't responded to you, I know that, and I'm gonna get to it. Otherwise, do try to enjoy our final reading selection of the semester. this is, we jumped a bit ahead. But this is about as far into the future, as far into the present, I should say, as we can reasonably get, I think, unless we wind up doing at some point, maybe we can get a Brit Lit 3, or English Lit 3 even, and we can get closer to now without skimping on people. But at any rate, again, try to enjoy it. Hit me up with questions or comments if you need to. The discussion boards are up. Keep working on your final paper. And I don't know, good luck with all that. And I'll talk to you guys again next week for one last time.